Okay, let's travel back in time. We're talking nearly 4,000 years ago to meet one of history's most influential rulers, a king named Hammurabi. Now, this guy was a conqueror, an empire builder. He was even considered a god in his own lifetime. But his most enduring legacy? It wasn't his empire. It was something he had carved into stone.
So you might think our story starts in ancient Babylon, right? Nope, we're actually starting in Washington, D.C. See, on the wall of the U.S. Supreme Court building, there's this incredible marble frieze showing the great lawgivers of history. You've got Moses, Solomon, Confucius, and right there alongside them is the Babylonian king Hammurabi.
And that's got to make you wonder, right? How on earth did an ancient Mesopotamian ruler end up immortalized in the heart of American justice? I mean, what did he do that was so revolutionary that we're still talking about it 4 millennia later?
Well, the answer really comes down to the two sides of Hammurabi. You have the brilliant conqueror who built an empire from scratch, and then you have the visionary lawgiver who created one of the world's first and most famous legal codes. So let's rewind. Way before the empire, Hammurabi's story starts, well, pretty small. When he took the throne around 1792 BC, Babylon wasn't some mighty power. It was just a minor city-state in a really, really dangerous neighborhood.
So take a look at this map. This gives you a sense of what Hammurabi was up against. Babylon was just this little kingdom, totally overshadowed by these older, more powerful rivals. You had Larsa to the south, Eshnunna to the north, and the mighty kingdom of Elam lurking to the east.
Seriously, survival was not a given. These city-states were in a constant state of war over things like fertile land and trade routes. So for the first few years of his reign, Hammurabi wasn't out there conquering. He was fortifying, raising the city walls and just trying to hang on.
But Hammurabi, he wasn't just playing defense. He had a much, much bigger plan. Through a pretty stunning combination of diplomacy and warfare, he didn't just survive. He completely redrew the map of Mesopotamia.
Over just a couple of decades, his whole strategy of being patient and turning his rivals against each other paid off, big time. He eventually turned on the southern power of Larsa and took control of the entire plain. Then he marched north, conquering his former allies. Before you know it, even the powerful Assyrians were forced to pay him tribute. The guy had united almost all of Mesopotamia.
His entire reign lasted 42 years. Just think about that for a second. In a single lifetime, he went from being a minor king, basically fighting for survival, to the undisputed ruler of this vast, unified empire.
But here's the thing about building an empire. Conquering it is one thing, but how do you actually rule it? Ruling over all these different peoples and customs required more than just a strong army. It required a new idea, a way to create order and justice for everyone. It required a code.
And this, right here, is Hammurabi's most famous legacy. Look, we've all heard the phrase an eye for an eye, but the Code of Hammurabi was so much more complex and, frankly, so much more groundbreaking than that one single idea.
This is it. The actual artifact, a 2-meter-tall stone pillar covered in 282 laws. And the carving at the very top is key, because it establishes where the authority comes from. It shows Hammurabi receiving the laws directly from Shamash, the god of justice. This wasn't just the king's law, this was presented as divine law. So what was so revolutionary about it? Well, earlier legal systems, like the Sumerian codes, were mostly about compensating the victim, usually with a fine. Hammurabi's code made a radical shift. It focused on the physical punishment of the person who actually committed the crime.
And get this, it also introduced principles that are like the bedrock of our own legal systems today. For the first time, a code established the presumption of innocence, giving the accused a chance to provide evidence. It set specific penalties for specific crimes to limit personal revenge. And, crucially, it was written in Akkadian, the everyday language, and then displayed in public so anyone who was literate could read the law for themselves.
And that brings us to its most famous principle, known as lex talionis, or the law of retaliation. The idea here wasn't just about being harsh, it was about proportion. The goal was to limit personal retribution, to make sure the punishment fit the crime and didn't just spiral into some endless blood feud. Now, Hammurabi's empire, like all empires, would eventually fade away. But his code, written in stone, would have a legacy far beyond anything he could have imagined.
It's really fascinating how his reputation changed over time. His own people celebrated him as this mighty conqueror who brought them victory and peace.
But for later generations of Mesopotamians, his military victories kind of faded into the background. His role as the ideal lawgiver, the king of justice, that became his primary legacy. And the code itself? Wow, it went on an unbelievable journey. After Hammurabi died, his empire crumbled. About 600 years later, invaders plundered the stone stele and carried it off. And there it lay, buried and lost for almost 3,000 years, until archaeologists rediscovered it in 1901, bringing Hammurabi's laws back into the light.
And so we come all the way back to this powerful image. Not the conqueror holding a weapon, but the ruler receiving the principles of justice from his god. This is the image of Hammurabi that has truly endured.
Hammurabi's massive empire, built through military force, unraveled pretty soon after he was gone. But his attempt to create a system of universal, impartial justice, that is echoed through all of history. Which really makes you wonder, in the long run, what's more powerful and what truly lasts? Is it the power you wield or the principles you establish?